RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove side. You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio, and the smooth jazz interludes, as my brother Dr. Mark Echo likes to say. What we do each and every Wednesday is try to bring to you information that can really help make your walk just a little better, maybe make some clarity about some issues that mainstream does not talk about.
That's right.
Today we're talking about prison chaplaincy, and this is a subject that we're going to touch over and over again. We have so many people who are being released from the penal system that we do not have the correct pathways for them to make the adjustments necessary to become proper citizens. And a lot of times we sit back and do more complaining than we do actions on trying to empower.
Yeah.
And man, you have said something so eloquent before we get going about power and authority.
Yes. So bottom line is that our culture says that you take power, and when you take power, you close your fist. But with authority, God has granted every single one of us authority in our realms and our spheres of influence, and we hold authority with an open hand, and we're generous to people. As Deuteronomy 15 tells us, that we should be open-handed to our brothers and not tight-fisted or closed-fisted. So the difference between power, closed-fisted, and authority, open-handed, is where we're at, where we're coming from, what our ethos is all about.
Well, we always do 3 segments in the first hour, and we always talk about speaking to life, how Proverbs speaks to life, because this is the rule book and the roadmap on how to have a good life. And so we had a chaplain on just a few weeks ago, so I would love for you to review some of the things a few weeks ago we said about chaplaincy, breaking down the verbiage.
Absolutely. So let's deal with both words. When we talk about the concept of having a place for people to come back to. So we're talking about returning citizens here to one degree or another, but obviously today's show is focused on in-prison chaplaincy. But when we're providing a hospice or a rest house for travelers when they come out, this is a really unique word, which literally means a shelter. So we really are responsible to view our brothers and sisters who might be coming out of prison as guests, as strangers and foreigners in the sense of what Leviticus 19 teaches us, and that is that we bear responsibility for anybody who is a foreigner or a stranger in our midst, and yet our brother. And so, as you suggested, HB, before, the Bible talks an awful lot about prison. We could go all the way back to Genesis, talk about Joseph being in prison for 2 years. We could talk about Jesus, Matthew 25. You got to visit those people in prison. But then there's the chaplaincy emphasis, and the word chaplain comes from this ancient French word which means clergyman. So literally a chaplain is somebody who is allied with the clergy, who does religious services, and that kind of concept is what we're going to really focus on today with Claude Robinson as a focus in prison on chaplaincy.
And then since we always come from the root and the scriptures in Proverbs, help us understand prison chaplain's role then.
Yeah, absolutely. So Proverbs speaks all kinds of things about justice. Here are just a few statements out of the book of Proverbs. A brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city. So if somebody has done wrong, there are 5 steps. You need to admit, forgive, repent, reconcile, and reunion with folks. I'll say those again. Admit, forgive, repent, reconcile, and reunion. 21:3 from Proverbs, to do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. We put on a show at church sometimes as Christians. Man, that's not right. We ought to be up front with folks about justice and righteousness. And then 29:14 out of Proverbs, if the king faithfully judges the poor, his throne will be established forever. And here we have the emphasis on the connection between politics, the prison system, and culture itself, and the responsibility of the politician to step up to do right by everybody, including those who don't have a voice, such as those coming out of prison.
Wow, that's powerful. Because we see so much of it today.
That's right.
And it's ironic, last night, not getting too far off of where we are today, we had people there who were standing for justice.
That's right.
Indiana Civil Rights Commission, and then we had some police officers there trying to get people to understand, their role in the community. And it's a gray area, it's a fine line a lot of times when we are talking about, taking back in our brothers and sisters who have done wrong and now, ready to get right.
As I was chatting there with the major who was there last evening, we talked about there is no routine, like he was suggesting. There are no routine stops as a police officer. And I walked up to him and I said, "Man, there is no normal." And yeah, absolutely.
And I try to explain that to the youth that I deal with in this world. When the police show up, they're not showing up like your buddy showing up ready to go to the movie or watch a game. Every time they're called to the scene, there is drama that has been spread throughout that airwave about, hey, you need to get there. And when they get there, they have to be on alert. So we're not dealing with normal people. So we have to realize there is a reason why. Because if someone's been in prison, most times they have been in an act where it's caused them to have some police interaction. So it's a gray area. You know, we have to think about the other side as well.
That's right.
In our grace and wanting to open our arms, we also have to remember these people have been dangerous. These people have done wrong, but we have to be. What did you say? Repent?
Yeah, we got to do 5 things in a row. We need to admit, forgive, repent, reconcile, and reunion.
There you go, and that's what we need. That reunion part is what we need to do. And the last question of this first segment, Mark. How does Christian theology give a basis for prison ministry?
Sure. So my compulsion to help others is always going to be based on my commitment to love others, which shows my love for God. So there's this old hymn. It's called Rescue the Perishing, and one of the lines reads, "Touched by a loving heart, wakened by kindness, chords that were broken will vibrate once again." Isn't that cool?
That scripture always sounds like poetry to me. Right?
Exactly, man, because, music's your first language. Mm-hmm. So God knows my motives. So why do I do certain things? If I do good so I can feel good, that's not the right attitude or motivation. I do what's right so that God sees my motives. And my intention is driven by my love for God and therefore my love for other people. His redemption in me is now what I give back to others, since he has given to me what he's given to me, and that's the grace of Jesus, because Jesus is the one who saves. Then emphasis again on the old hymn, Rescue the Perishing. But one of the things that we need to talk about specifically as it relates to this in terms of prison is that we need to talk about returning citizens. Now, some folks talk about these folks coming out of prison as ex-offenders or parolees, and I think word choice matters here. So when we talk about returning citizens, we have to ask the question, how is the best way that we can help people? And quite frankly, the very first thing we need to do right out of the box is use the right words. So if we're using proper terminology that doesn't offend or put off or stagnate the conversation or bring up the question, what do you mean when you say this word? If we're generous with people about word choices that they think, that's going to bring not only justice, but it's going to bring peace. Because peace in the Bible literally is the word shalom, which means wholeness. So we're looking for peaceful paths. We're looking for peace that creates joy. We're actually looking that, as Proverbs suggests, when a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. So there it is. In the nutshell, when we're talking about Christian theology all the way through Scripture about prison ministry, we're all consumed with not only the issue of justice, but that peace must rest upon justice and justice upon righteousness. There it is.
And I love more than anything the fact that when we mention a cheerful giver, and a cheerful giver means that you do not expect anything back, or you're not trying to become self-serving because of the action that you just put forth. And God will shine on that. But if you're going in from a manner of, look, I'm going to give to you so I can feel good about giving to you.
Right. That ain't working, man.
That ain't working. So we're going to come right back. When we come back, we want to discuss more on prison chaplaincy. In the next segment, we're going to be talking about current events. And, you'll find it interesting to see how straight from Bible to now.
That's right.
A whole bunch is still relevant. We'll be right back. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site. And we are back. You are listening to the Warp and Woof Internet Radio Show here on the Cool Groove site. Dr. Mark Echo, Harold H.B. Bell, and we are talking about prison chaplaincy today. And that first segment, man, you were hitting some home runs on the commentary. What we want to do is go into the second segment and talk about current events. And we have had discussions about prisons on this show before. Remind us what our guests have said, Mark, so far, because, I mean, this is probably our 34th show dealing in prison ministry.
Absolutely. So I need to mention, first of all, our website. That's comeniusinstitute.org, COMENIUS institute.org. There you will find under videos all of the podcasts to this point that we have had on this particular show. And so the folks that I'm mentioning there, if you're interested at all, go check them out on the podcast. And before I mention the specific shows, I need to give a shout out to two people that really need to be recognized on a regular basis. I thank them all the time, but I want to thank them publicly. For a number of months when we first started this show, a year ago now, Lachelle Feevel was very much working behind the scenes for us, helping us to cut out the music, create the podcasts that came out. And so Lachelle was the early person who was invested in the programming. And now we have Josh Collingswood, who is just a real technical genius, frankly, and he takes care of all of the behind-the-scenes stuff for us now at Comenius. And I'm just really thankful for Josh Collingswood and for his good work. So let me get to a few folks that I need to mention as it relates to other discussions we've had about prison and chaplaincy on this program. And one of the folks that we just had, just 2 weeks ago actually, Shannon Cockrell was here, and he was talking with us there about hospice chaplaincy. That was January 18th. So if you're interested in hearing what we had to say about chaplaincy, check out the January 18th podcast. And just another word out here on the side to some of my students who might actually be listening, perhaps even to the podcast. I know that I'm going to be teaching a class in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in March, and at least one of my students there has suggested that they're really interested in chaplain's ministry. So I highly recommend that you check out Shannon Cockrell's event. And then Richard Samuels had been in and out of the system over many years. He explains his work in Growing Indie, and that was on our 16th episode. That was June 1st, 2016, Richard Samuels. Kevin Russell, before that, faith-based parole officer. Kevin might even be listening this morning. We were messaging back and forth early this AM. Faith-based parole officer in Indy. His episode aired April 20th. And then, of course, Kevin connected me with the Isaiah House, which is overseen by David Cedarquist, a pastor down on the east side. June 19th, we had David in here, and we talked about Isaiah House, this transitional housing for returning citizens. So bottom line is, I would say over and over and over again, people need people, and what we're always doing in this show is connecting community, kind of like what you do, right, HB?
Hey, man, I think it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Works. Togetherness is better for the whole.
Yeah.
And we sometimes we get caught up in what we do, how we do what we do, and then connecting, like you said,
right.
Warping and woofing.
That's it.
Becomes a problem. How can everyday Christians be involved with and invested in the work of prison chaplains?
Sure. So I always think of this story whenever I hear a question such as this. My little girl, Chelsea, she's not little anymore. She's 30, has two of her own. But she's the wife of a church planting partnership up in Defiance, Ohio. And I remember a couple of years ago visiting up there in Defiance, and we were driving past the prison in Defiance, Ohio. And this is what Chelsea said to me. I'm quoting her word for word. She said, "Daddy, I am glad that the prison isn't too far away from us. I go there quite a bit." And what she meant by that was that she's there ministering to people, that folks are in their congregation who have come out of prison, returning citizens, and they've had some tremendous opportunities to connect with folks who are coming out of prison. So I just wanted to give that shout out. Another thing I wanted to bring up as it relates to this particular issue of being involved with and invested in is a prison ministry group that I'm going to pretty much just talk about for the rest of our time, actually, throughout the next 20 minutes or so, and that's Prison Fellowship. That's prisonfellowship.org. And what I'm looking at here, if you go to prisonfellowship.org/resources/video, you can see all kinds of really cool videos about good people doing good things in the neighborhood, around prisons, in prisons, prisoners speaking their gratitude for the help that they've received, all kinds of great things. I think there's over 100 videos here on their playlists. Again, prisonfellowship.org. Check out their videos. It'll tell you about how to become invested in and involved with prison chaplaincy.
And speaking of invested in and involved with, why is the work of prison chaplaincy so important to Christians and the church?
Yeah, man, I got to talk about my kids again. So this is a shout out to my son Tyler. This young man, again, not real young anymore. He's 33. He's one of the only people I know who actually writes real letters to people. I mean, handwritten letters to people and sends them to people. It's amazing to me. Anyway, for a number of months, over a year, as I recall, he was writing to a prisoner in an Ohio prison. And just back and forth. And now this man returned, got himself a job. Actually, Tyler helped him get a job as a returning citizen up in Ohio. And this man calls Tyler his big brother, even though this guy's older than Tyler is, because Tyler stepped up. So the answer to the question of why help prisoners, some folks will say, and I feel my anger rising when I even say this, why help prisoners? Aren't they just getting what they deserve? Once again, I highly recommend that you go to the prisonfellowship.org website, and they actually have an answer to that question, why help prisoners? And there are all kinds of answers to that particular question, but let me just read you some stats. These are actually earth-shattering statistics and really very touching and dramatic for the church. There are 2.2 million men and women incarcerated in our country right now. And because of that, there are 2.7 children without a parent because those parents are in prison. I'll just repeat that again. 2.2 million people incarcerated and 2.7 million children without a parent who are in prison right now. And the sadness of this is awful stuff. And so when I think about what the church needs to do, I always will say to people, we need to step up. People need people. If you like to read, go find a child whose folks are in prison that struggles in school and read to them. Maybe you love to talk. Maybe you love to write. Go find a prison ministry. Go find a prisoner. Go start writing, become a pen pal to prisoners in prison. There are all different kinds of ways to do this. And of course, our guest this next hour is going to help us with all of that as he explains what it means to actually step up in the prison system as he has as a chaplain.
You know, it's interesting. The take, I guess, and we talk about all the time, how you grew up, what was your environment, what were your experiences. I never knew how powerful that my mother being incarcerated would be and have an impact on my life and the way that I approach it now, because my sentiment, and I don't want to say sentiment like in a bad way, but just my passion for understanding when people do wrong that they can come back in redemption, how powerful redemption is.
There it is.
The little bit of help that you give that can trampoline somebody to that next level is so powerful. And I never thought about it consciously until, we started doing this show and started talking about it. It was just something innate that said, hey, here's some people out here, needing some assistance, needing some help, just needing a hand up. Not a handout.
There it is.
And so, I think we just need to do better in continuing to love one another and forgive, as Scripture says.
That's right.
We're going to come back and we're going to get into your famous hour, the movies. What movies can we relate prison ministry and prison chaplaincy to? You are listening to Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site at Radio Next. And we are back. You are listening to RadioNext.TV, Warp and Woof Radio, Dr. Mark Echo, Harold H.B. Bell, every Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. to 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, bringing you everything about Proverbs that you could imagine in a different twist, intersecting wisdom and knowledge.
There it is.
And we call it Warp and Woof. Tell them about Warp and Woof.
Warp and Woof. Yeah, the vertical horizontal threads that make fabric. So the wholeness is what we're after here, and that's the concept behind Comenius, Colossians 1:17. By him are all things held together. So we believe that Jesus is the one who is the wholeness and brings wholeness.
And we do information all the time, Mark, all community all the time, and it's amazing. We're going into our last segment before our great guest, Mr. Claude Robinson, takes the microphone. But technology now has created a plethora of ways to receive information. You can no longer say, well, I didn't know that.
That's right.
And use that as an excuse or a valid excuse.
That's right.
What websites and books can help us with the information about prison chaplaincy?
Absolutely. So as I suggested in the last segment, I'm just going to keep going back to the same place, in this segment as well, and that's prisonfellowship.org. Right now I have it up in front of me on my computer under resources that they have there, Justice Reform Resources. Some great information here, all kinds of connections, things like pretrial, sentencing, conditions of incarceration, release, community connections. You can actually hold your cursor over one of the states that you're involved in or interested in. It will give you all kinds of information. But I wanted to specifically land on one issue that they suggest here, and that is a 6-lesson study guide. It's called Outrageous Justice. Outrageous Justice, again, prisonfellowship.org. And there are all kinds of great sessions here. Session 1, for instance, Justice that Restores. Session 2, Justice that Responds. Justice that Listens is Session 3, and on and on and on. Prison Fellowship is just one of those organizations that I believe is a go-to place for anybody who's interested in checking out what is available online. They have all kinds of other resources, including books, but there's just a quick overview of that.
Tons and tons of information out there. You could almost Google,
yeah, exactly,
and just you put in the word of your liking, and I'm telling you, you'll pull up almost any and everything. And we have to start using that a little more. Some of the information is not true, so be sure about that. But
right.
There is a lot of pertinent information of what we're speaking of today. Tell us about Christian groups involved in prison chaplaincy right now.
This is going to take me about 30 seconds, man, because all I'm going to say again is prisonfellowship.org. This was started by Chuck Colson, who actually went to prison after the Watergate scandal back in the day in the 1970s. If you're at all interested in checking out Chuck Colson's story, check it out there at prisonfellowship.org. There are chapters around the United States and around the world. Please go to prisonfellowship.org and check out all that is there. Tremendous opportunities for us to learn so much about this important ministry.
And before we get to Brother Claude Robinson, this is I love how you set this up. The last question of the segment of your conversation with Harold H.B. Bell. Since you are a movie buff, I'm sure there are pretty, just a whole ton of prison movies
there are.
That you would recommend, and why, should we look at some of these movies pertaining to the prison chaplains?
Yeah, so I'll mention a few just up front just to kind of get us going, but then I want to highlight a few that I think are really important for us to watch. The Green Mile with Tom Hanks is one of those more recent prison movies that really connects with people. They really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen The Green Mile. Birdman from Alcatraz. This takes us back to the 60s with Burt Lancaster. A fine film, a little bit slow perhaps, but nonetheless an important kind of a snapshot of what could be in prison. And then, of course, you can't go with prison movies without mentioning Clint Eastwood's Escape from Alcatraz. This is just a great movie. If you enjoy the action flick, check out Escape from Alcatraz. But here are 4 that I really want to highlight that are really important and powerful within the scope of what we're discussing today. The first is The Defiant Ones. This stars Sidney Poitier. This is a black and a white convict. They're both shackled to each other, and they are making a prison escape. So imagine Sidney Poitier shackled to a white guy, and they are getting out of prison, and it's basically a statement in a movie about the problem between the races. This is a really powerful film. I highly recommend it, The Defiant Ones. The next one would be, and I'm smiling saying this, Cool Hand Luke. Paul Newman. I'm always saying to myself, get your mind right, Mark. Get your mind right. And I'm always thinking about that because that's one of the great lines out of that particular movie, along with another great line, what we have here is a failure to communicate. That's another great line. I highly recommend Cool Hand Luke. Brubaker, Robert Redford, 1980. Here he is, a new prison enforcer, a new prison administrator coming in, cleaning up the system with a very young Morgan Freeman. Check that out if you haven't seen it. Brubaker with Robert Redford.
That was probably his first movie, if I'm
believe.
Not mistaken, because one good thing about Morgan, a little history buff, he was, I think, 52 years old when he came,
before
and I think
it
was Brubaker. Yeah, so that's interesting.
Now, check this out. He also did another famous prison movie, The Shawshank Redemption. Morgan Freeman.
That?
Exactly. And one of the greatest movies of all time, still ranked as #1 in so many different lists. All of these films, in one way or another, are dealing with wrongful incarceration and specifically the comeuppance for a corrupt prison warden and the importance of justice. That sometimes, and in this case, Shawshank Redemption, takes 19 years, man. 19 years. Things do not move as we always want them to move.
You already know, and as we go to break, I was going to do a little funny and mention stir crazy, but we don't want to. Wrongful imprisonment. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mark. I am sorry. We're going to come right back, and we're going to introduce you to Claude Robinson. I'm sure there's going to be some interesting conversation that goes on about a man who is a prison chaplain, and he can give us firsthand information. Stay tuned. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site at RadioNext.tv.
Next.tv at the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. We come to you every Wednesday morning from 10 until noon, and we are engaging all different kinds of issues and events and folks from around the Indianapolis area. One of the taglines for this particular show is do good, do good, do good, from Titus chapter 3. And we are believers who desperately think that the Christian message, not only is it the most valuable and the greatest truth of any lifetime, but it is also something that needs to be put into practice. So today we are discussing prison ministries, prison chaplaincy in particular, and we have a special guest with us here today, Claude Robinson, and I'm really happy that Claude is here. First thing that I did when Claude came into the studio today was to show him my socks, because he bought me a pair of socks a couple years ago, and I wanted him to know that I always remember this. Claude has been a student of mine, and we've been friends for some time. Claude, welcome to the show. Tell us something about yourself, your family, your church, life experiences, what kind of work you do in the Indianapolis community.
Thank you, Professor. I've been in this community all my life. I started off, most of my career was in the insurance industry. I'm married. I've got 3 sons and 9 grandkids, and so I've been very blessed in this community since I've been here. Started off in the insurance industry like I was telling you, one of my offices was at Allstate, right around the corner here. So I spent a lot of time here in this neighborhood. But after going back to school, I decided a few years ago to go back to school, and I've been out of school for quite a while. So when I decided to go back to get my master's, I ran into you. And so that was a big impact on my life. One of the things that I noticed when we were in class, that a lot of people didn't know what they were going back to school for. I knew what I went back to school for. I knew what I wanted to do. After being in the insurance industry for about 35 years, I was ready for a change. And I asked God what kind of change that I needed to do. And one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to teach. And so after I met you and I went through some of your classes, I loved your style of teaching. And so that's one of the things that I implemented when I got into teaching. So I started teaching about maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. And then I told my wife, I said, it's time for me to move on. So when I decided to move on, I was looking at some areas in chaplaincy. I had got my master's, and I said, it's time for me to look in some areas in chaplaincy. So I looked at some prisons, I looked at the hospitals, and I told my wife, and she knows me, I said that when I make up my mind on something, it's done. So I told her, I said, listen, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move on. I'm teaching now, and I started teaching at Ivy Tech. I'm not teaching what I had planned on teaching. When I got in your class, I was planning on teaching in some of the Bible colleges, but that didn't happen. So God had other plans for me. I'm actually teaching criminal justice at Ivy Tech, which is ironic because I met a lot of people through this system. So one of the guys that I had speaking for me with some of my classes was the superintendent at Pendleton. And so he would come and speak for me, and then we would talk, and we've been friends for a lot of years. And so one day I told my wife, I said, I'm looking at, making some moves. So I put in some application to some chaplaincy jobs. He had noticed I had put in an application at one of the prisons and gave me a call. He said, listen, don't take that job. I've got an opening here at Pendleton. I want you to take it. So hold off for about another month. So within a couple of weeks of making my decision that I wanted to go into another field and to go into chaplaincy, I had got an offer to go work at a prison. So God had opened up that door for me, and within a month I was working at the prison. As the funny thing is, I knew one of the directors. He's a good friend of mine, is also for the prison system, and he told me, he said, "You're taking on a mega church. You're looking at 1,800 inmates, and so you're going to be taking on a mega church. And I didn't understand what he was talking about when he told me that. But now, I realize now that it's been very demanding being around that many people, many people pulling at you. But it's been also very rewarding. I'll be honest with you. When I first took the position, I'm thinking about being a pastor in a church, and is more to it than that. Just preaching and teaching is much more to that. I realized that one of the things that I noticed in the community that there's not a lot of people know what the word chaplain means. And if I might wear my chaplain hat or a shirt or something like that, and somebody would ask me what branch of the service I'm in. So I realized that most people who know the word chaplain are people who are military people. Most people don't. Other people on the streets don't know what the word chaplain means. And so one of the things that I try to tell people, that chaplains are people who pastor to people who are disconnected to society. So you're looking at hospitals, people who are in the hospital cannot get out. You're looking at military people who are out away from home. So you're looking at chaplains who are providing pastoral service to people who are disconnected to society. And so that's what I try to explain to people when they ask me, what is a chaplain? Because I get that all the time. What do you guys do? And so we do pastor to people who are disconnected to society. So you're looking at, and that's hence the prison system. And so you're looking at a lot of times we're protecting the rights of people for religion. So we're doing most for 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 people for religion. More than just preaching and teaching and pastoring. So we're protecting their religious rights. So in the prison system, you've got about 15 different religions in the prison system. And so we're also program coordinators. So our job is to find people who's going to do these programs, because obviously I'm not a Muslim and I'm not a Buddhist, and so I have to find somebody who can coordinate those programs.
Okay.
And so I would find, and we would find people. We had to vet these people and make sure that they're suitable to come into the prison. Then we have to train them, because you just can't allow people to come into a prison system. It is very dangerous. It is very demanding, because you have a lot of people who are con artists that a lot of times they can take advantage of people. So we do have a long training process inside the prison when we bring in these different, we call them chaplains, but they're not paid chaplains. I'm a paid chaplain. These guys are volunteer chaplains. So we have volunteer Buddhists, we have volunteer Muslims that come in, groups of Muslims that come in. We've got Hebrew Israelites, MSTA, all different religions that a lot of people haven't heard of. But like I said, there's about 15 of them. They're not all very active, but they're allowed to practice these different religions.
Wow. I'm just sitting over here going, you have an awful lot of work to do, man.
Yes.
That's a lot of work. I wanted to jump back to something you said when you were talking about the issue of teaching. And I think it'd really be helpful for people to hear, how do you teach your classes at Ivy Tech? And specifically, I'm interested in how many different kinds of folks you invite into your classes, and why do you do that?
Well, it's been kind of strange, because I invite a lot of people, mostly criminal justice. I've had the prosecutor in, I've had the chief of police in, and what I've noticed, they're all Christians. And this wasn't done by design. It just happened to be that's who my circle of people are.
Yeah.
And so they all come in and they all preach, not preach, but they all teach and speak about their Christian background. And so we have a lot of people in the police department and the prosecutor's office that are Christians, and they're not afraid to tell that. So I do bring them in my class, because I teach several different criminal justice class. Right now I'm teaching an introduction to corrections class, which we're doing visits to different prisons around the state to get them an introduction of the prison system, I also teach introduction to criminal justice, and so I will have some of the, like I said, a prosecutor come in, or the parole board. I have some of the parole officers come in and speak. So I have different types of people that'll come in and explain their careers and how they got into their careers and what it takes.
How do your students respond to these people who are coming in? They don't necessarily have a degree in teaching or something, but they certainly have the experience, the experiential knowledge. How do they respond in the classroom to the folks you're bringing in?
I think they respond well because of the fact that they know these guys are out there. These men and women are out there, and they have the experience that they're looking for. Because a lot of these young men and women in my class, they want to be lawyers, they want to be FBI agents. They've got some big goals. But how do you get there? And one of the things that I try to impress on them is mentorship. Finding somebody that you can tag on and learn from. Yes. And one of the things that I've done throughout my whole career, I always found people that were older than me and that was much more experienced to me, and I tagged on them. I don't care what state they were in. I will call them and I'll tell them I got a problem with this, or how do I handle this. So mentorship is very important to me. So I try to get them involved with people that they can meet with on their lifetime basis. Just like you and I, we met, and I've been tackling you ever since. And
I'm returning the favor today, man.
So I look at the experience that I got from you, and I was like, man, that's you're looking at what kind of style do I want to teach. I still use your case study method.
Oh, good.
When I do my teaching, and so I try to prepare my classes that way.
Nice.
So that I know what my agenda is going to be throughout the whole class.
That's a great way to go. So this brings up something else, and I didn't even plan to think about this particular aspect of life, but since you bring this up, obviously this is a radio program that's a Christian radio program. The two of us are believers. You just mentioned that most of the folks that come in, if not all, into your class are believers. So I have to ask this question. It kind of strikes me as interesting. You have students in your classes, some of whom I'm assuming aren't Christians, but is there any sense in which your students are moved or changed or transformed or influenced in any way by people who are Christians who are coming in doing this difficult work, whatever it might be? And do they get any sense of grace, of generosity? Do they walk away saying, wow, that's going to impact my life, I'm going to think about that more? Anything like that?
Some of them have. I don't know if you remember, I think you've had him in your class, Cardona.
Yeah, sure.
He was a police officer.
Yeah.
I had him speak in my class one day, and he was a chaplain. And it was ironic that one of the young girls that's in my class remembered him from a couple of years ago when her sister died. He came out to her house. That really impacted her for him to come out there and speak to our class. And so a lot of them have been affected by some of the testimonies and some of the lifestyles that these people have lived in their lives. So they have been affected by that. I didn't notice that. I thought maybe, it's going to be maybe it might be a problem, but it wasn't. This semester that I'm teaching right now, I asked a question, and like I always ask, how many people in this class that I've had in the past, in other classes? And to my surprise, half of the class raised their hand.
Oh, my.
And so, they're not ducking me, at least, So
that's good.
I was kind of proud of that fact, because I always try to be better at what I do.
Yeah.
And hopefully that somebody's getting something out of my classes.
Yeah, well,
that's
exactly.
going to impact their life. So, and I've had people that I've given letters for recommendations for jobs and so forth. So, yeah.
Well, people are tagging on to you now, man. Look out.
Yeah, and that's good. That's what I'm. I wanted to give back. I spent most of my life in sales, and I told I felt like it was time for me to give back to God's work, and it's been busy. I mean, I think I work harder now than I ever worked in my life, and so it's been something that's very rewarding, but it has been very busy. Some of the other things that we do in the chaplains, because like I said, people always ask, we do pastoral counseling. So we do a lot of counseling, and one of the things that I found that when a young man's mother died or a child died, they don't ask me what religion I'm from. I don't care if they're Muslim, whatever. I asked them, I said, do you mind if I pray for you? nobody's told me no yet. And so we continue to do pastoral counseling to those who are suffering, because they are suffering. One of the things about the prison where I'm at, most of these people are never getting out. And so you're looking at the fact that their mother died. They're not going to a funeral service. And so they're not going to, if their little boy died. You know, I had one boy that got hit by a car at 2 years old. He cannot go to this service. He's got to have some pastoral counseling, because he's going to be grieving for a long time. So we do some grief counseling. We do marriage counseling. We have, I don't do a lot of marrying, but we do some counseling. We do have classes for. We do have I do require classes for everybody who gets baptized. I think I baptized about a dozen people last year. And so before that, I require them to do a class on baptism and what it means and why are you getting baptized. You'd be surprised, a lot of people don't know why they're doing it. Yeah. And so I do have classes for that. I give a lot of death notices. One of the worst part of my job is death notices, which I had to do one, I think it was yesterday. And so one of the problems is when they see me coming, or if I call them to my office, they're shaking already before they get there, because they realize, you know, the only reason why you calling me is because somebody's sick or dying. Yeah. Which is it's kind of difficult sometimes, because you know it's you don't want to be looked at as the father of death, you know, when they see you, you know. But I had a guy come to my office, and he comes to my office already crying afterward. I'm like, oh, no, it's nothing serious, man. I just got a question for you. You know? Oh, man. You know, it's just like that's the reputation that we have, because we do a lot of, you know, out of 1,800 people, somebody's always dying. Sure. Or somebody's always sick. And so I try to, these guys cannot, since they cannot go to a funeral, we'll try to give them a call to their loved ones. So they can speak to them maybe before they pass away. Or I've had that happen a few times where people were in hospice, and that offender would get a chance to talk to them before they pass away. Oh, that's great. They appreciate it.
This is, if you're listening live or later on in the podcast, and you don't have some compassion just kind of welling up in your heart, I don't know what's wrong with you, honestly. When you stop to think about people, human beings who are incarcerated, who, as we're listening to Claude Robinson tell us, will never get out of jail, will not be able to go to a funeral, will not be able to grieve over the sickness of a loved one. You know, these are huge human events, and these are things that ought not to be taken lightly. You are listening to RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. We're going to take a quick radio musical break and be right back. You are listening to RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. We are here in studio today with Mr. Claude Robinson, and we're really happy that you're with us here today to talk about prison chaplaincy. We've got about 20 minutes thereabouts left here in our program, and we want to make sure to hit some of the important ideas that come out of a prison chaplaincy role. So when you think about this particular question, how would you respond? How does your Christian view of life inform your practice of being a prison chaplain?
I think within the last year I've learned, I thought I knew about compassion and about love. Matter of fact, my next sermon that I'm working on right now is about love, out of 1 Corinthians 13. I thought I knew a lot about love, but I've learned about a pastor's love being in the prison system. I've met some very strong Christian men that are never going to get out. They inspire me every day that I'm here at the prison. We have 3 different services every week, Thursday evening, and 2 services on Saturdays. And those are the things that keep me there. I enjoy our Christian services, and they're something that I really came there to do. The other part about the administration and the budgeting and the program coordinating, that part of it I wasn't too crazy about when I found out about it, because the first couple of weeks I'm like, whoa, this is not what I was looking for, you know. So, but after a while it was part of the deal. So I've gotten used to it. But I do enjoy the Christian services, and I do enjoy the fact that I can counsel with people. I had one of my cousin's daughters ask me over the holidays if you ran into the guy from Boston that killed all those people in the church, would you speak to him? And without hesitation, I said, absolutely. we all have a right to salvation. And so that's one of the things that I have learned. I have been looking at people in a Christ-like manner when I'm talking to them, and I don't look at what they're there for, because some of those guys are there for some hideous things. And so if I looked at that and I judged them, I couldn't witness to them. And so I don't judge. I just preach the gospel. Then I move on. So
when you think about this, and this is something we talked about off air, here you're talking about the gospel, you're talking about being compassionate, loving, and so on. But one of the difficulties you suggested is that churches have a hard time with prison ministry per se. Tell us why that might be, and what kind of response should we have if we are truly compassionate and loving toward others?
I think that's only been within the last, I say, 10 or 15 years. When I was growing up, churches were big into prison ministry. It's just that now that there's no pat on the back for prison ministry. And I think a lot of people don't see it as a rewarding ministry. And so we don't have as many churches in there. We have to fight to get churches in the prison to teach classes and to come out and preach a sermon. It's not as easy as it was before. You know, we used to have my own church, we would have 15, 20 guys going out there to a prison ministry. And I think we're down to 2.
Wow.
And so it's not as big as it was, I'd say, 10, 15 years ago. And I don't know why that is.
The sadness of that, going back to something that you had mentioned just before our break, you said, and I actually wrote it down, that pastoral service, what you do as a chaplain is pastoral service to people who are disconnected. And it's that word disconnected that really kind of caught me. So when you are talking about, hey, it's hard to get the church invested in this, how do we maybe use that word disconnected to say everybody's disconnected in one way or another, and then how do we re-engage people into that?
Well, and that's one of the things that I've learned also. I'm talking to guys and I'm listening to their background, and there's a world out there that we really don't have no idea about. For some of these guys, their lifestyles and their family lifestyles and their grandparents' lifestyle, there's a world that we're not connected to at all as far as the church, and we've got churches on every corner in the city. But you listen to these guys where they came from, and there's no you wonder, there's no reason why he wouldn't be there. And so a lot of times, I would say that a lot of these guys are being rescued. They're not being locked up. They're being rescued because of the lifestyle that they grew up in. And then I listen to some of the things that they've gone through with their family, with their mothers, and with their grandparents. It's like, man, it breaks my heart. Because this guy didn't have no hope, or this, because I'm with nothing but men. I said, but they don't have any hope when they were out there on the streets. And then I've also did volunteer work with the juvenile system. And so you listen to guys who listen to kids who don't know anything about Christ, ain't never heard the word Christ, and don't have anywhere to go once they get out, and they're 12 and 13 years old. Nobody wants them anymore. And so those are the things that you listen to their background, their life, and I said, now who's reaching these people on the streets? Yeah. Because there's a world out there we're not familiar with, and I'm ashamed to admit that. I've been all over the city, and I've been all over the state, and I traveled, and I said, there's a world out there that that's being neglected when it comes to the ministry.
When we talk generally speaking about something called generational poverty, so let's use that in a different way. Do you think that there's such a thing as generational incarceration?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I've got guys at the prison that's there with their brother and their father, all in the same prison, and you look at the same names. Their cousins are there. Their grandparents are in another prison. So it's from generation to generation. And so how do you break this cycle? Because it's a cycle of incarceration where it's been down from generation to generation. Especially when you're looking at the gang population. They look at it as a badge of honor to go to prison. And so a lot of them are there because of their lifestyle from the gangs.
You mentioned, you just used a word a moment ago, the word cycle. Do you see this, the problem of sinfulness, that is a person's sinful behavior, as just taking a cyclic approach, not only in their own life, but then in the life of their family and maybe for generations to come?
Well, it's funny because one of the things that we joked about when we see each other is about the time you was on the plane and asked the guy about why is it wrong to to murder. I started all of my classes out that way because I'm interested in hearing what is the answer to that. And you get some strange answers, and so that's one of the things that I ask people, we're in our a society that's got a lack of morals. I ask, why is it wrong? I mean, you guys are going to be our lawmakers. You guys are going to be writing some of our policies. So why is it wrong? And so I want to know. And so, it's a good question. So you look at some of the people that are in the prison system. If it wasn't for that chapel, they would never have known Christ. And I mean, these guys, once they get a hold to it, I mean, they're on fire. And I was told by my friend that's with the department. He said that these guys know that Bible inside and out. And so you got to be sharp when you get in there. And because they have nothing but time. Right. And so they're going to read it. They're going to read and they're going to study and they've got questions, and you've got to answer. And so it can be kind of challenging.
Yeah. You mentioned a word a moment ago. To me, it's a famous four-letter word, which is the word hope, which really is the centerpiece of the movie Shawshank Redemption, which is really, do we have hope? And if hope is the most important thing, what can we give to people? So when you think about the word hope in your setting, you just mentioned that a lot of these guys aren't ever getting out of this place. How in the world do they view hope in a way that maybe the rest of us don't even think about it?
They do view it through Christ.
Okay.
Most of them that I've met that have found a way to cope, they've done it through Christ. And I'm working with a young man right now that's having a very hard time. I think he's got some mental issues, but he's people in his family are dying, and so one of the guys that are in my chapel that's been around a long time, I asked him to take this guy on in your wing and mentor him for me. I said, because every time I see him, he's coming in my office with I have to give him some kind of death notice. I said, take this guy. I said, he's having a hard time. And I told him, I said, the only way you can cope with what you're going through right now is through Christ. You need to be here in this chapel every week. And I said, so I will assign a mentor. I'll bring some of the other inmates in and they will pray for him at that time. We all would pray for this guy. I said, now you take this guy and you mentor him about Christ. Bring him into the church service. And they do that. They will do that. And they'll bring him in, and they said, this is the only way you're going to be able to cope with what you're struggling with right now. Some of the guys in there are angry. Now, out of 1,800 offenders, we've got maybe 600 that don't come to the chapel service.
Really? Yeah. 600?
600. So you're not looking at, that's for Christian services now.
Yeah, I get
We're
it.
not talking about, you still got the Muslims and the other
sure.
services. But for the Christian services, we only have 600 people out of 1,800 that's coming to the services. I've had people that are out there, and it's a community that never knew where the chapel was at. They didn't know anything about it. But one of the problems, like I said, is that the society doesn't know what a chapel is. Sure. Some states have gotten rid of the chaplaincy program altogether. Then all of a sudden it's like, oops, we kind of messed up. So they'll bring it back in. But one of the reasons that is that they don't know what we do on a day-to-day basis. So we keep records of everything we do. We have about out of 1,800, we'll have 600 people come through our chapel on a daily basis, for different services, for different classes, and for counseling and different things like that. Yeah. We have a tremendous choir and band that's been
really a choir and a band.
They are nationally known. They're on YouTube and they've been on TV. And matter of fact, they're part of a international movie. And so we have a tremendous choir and band. They're one of my highlights of my week. They're a gospel group.
Wow.
And so it's and these guys are very talented. They've produced their own music. They've written their own music, and they recorded it. And when people see it, they're like, man, where do they get all this equipment? They kind of make it up as they go, because they don't have the equipment that you may have here, but they make it work. These guys are very talented. I'll have guys in my chapel service that we have about 8 clerks that work in the service. They do everything for us. But you got guys there that's been there 20 years and now they're speaking 3 languages fluently. I'm not talking about and got degrees from Ball State. And so I can name several guys that's gotten a bachelor's and a master's degree. One guy that comes to my service is working on his doctorate now in ministry. But only thing they can do with it is right there at the prison because they're not getting out.
Yeah.
But they're just thirsty for knowledge.
I'm sitting over here with my mouth half open because I'm thinking to myself, you literally have a church, as you well said early on. You have a church within the prison, and you're pastor.
Right.
You are the pastor of that church. And now to hear, and I'd never even known this before, that you have a choir, you have this gospel group that's well known, you have some kind of orchestral band going on in there, just amazing stuff. So for anybody out there listening, when you think about all of the different folks that are out there that might hear your voice and hear the kinds of things that are happening, what would you say to them if they were sitting right here in front of you right now about the guys in this prison and how can they connect and do good for those folks there?
I would say come and visit. I mean, come in there and do a service. Everybody that I've had come in and visit, they're surprised. They enjoy the services that we put on. And most of the time it's on Saturdays. I invite other pastors. I invite other ministers. I've had groups come in and play. And so, I tell them to come in and visit. You'll be surprised of the enthusiasm and the appreciation that these guys show for you coming in. This Saturday, a lot talking about ministry and Army ministry. We're celebrating the 4 chaplains in World War II this Saturday, and that which is done every year. But we have our own American Legion in the prison. I mean, we got a building that's dedicated to military personnel. So we're doing a service for the 4 chaplains. These 4 chaplains on this ship in World War II were all different denominations: Methodist, Baptist, and Jewish. They were all different denominations, but all 4 of them gave their life for the service of these men on this ship. They all gave up their life vests as the ship was sinking. And as the ship was sinking, they all sung songs as the ship was going down. So the Army celebrates these 4 chaplains every year. So we're having a 4 chaplain service this weekend at the service. So one of the pastors that's going to be speaking is Pastor Richard Curry. And Richard Curry is also one of the directors of the prison system. But he's going to be preaching our service this weekend. We've got some other speakers, and I'll be part of that service also. But I think for people, if they came in, they saw what we do and what we've accomplished, I think they would be very impressed and they would enjoy the service. And I think we'd have more people come out. So.
All right, great. Wow. Well, listen, if you're listening or if you hear this podcast later on, do not hesitate to connect with Claude Robinson about these things. It fascinates me as I'm listening to you talk about all of these different things, and you have this connection literally to the outside world. You have an American Legion. You have a whole section of your prison, as you suggested, toward the military. And then, of course, the famous 4 chaplain story. It's very famous. If you've never heard of it before, those who are listening, go Bing it, go Google it. The 4 chaplains who went down with the ship and gave up their life vest to others. When you think about the connection that you're able to make with all different kinds of folks, you're talking about gangs who you said it's a badge of courage for them to come into the prison system, or guys who have been in the military. How do you see this connection between the groups of individuals? What goes on between them, and how do you deal with some of the difficulties, let's say, that come up between groups?
Well, I'm not. One of the things that I didn't mention in the beginning is that I worked for the prison system 25, 30 years ago. And so I was into a lot of different reason why I know so many people in the system now and in criminal justice is because of my background some 25 years ago. And so I'm not naive in what some of these guys are in there for. And I'm not soft-hearted toward these guys. I have to be realistic with them. Most of these guys know what they're there for, and they realize what they've done, and they realize that they have to answer for that. But you do have some in there that are looking at the fact that they feel like they've been done wrong. And so you have to deal with them also. You have to also listen to their complaints about why I killed 3 people and they gave me 40 years. They think something was wrong with that. And so I have to deal with those questions and explain to them how they have to deal with that in that prison. How they have to live with that prison system, and and these are the people that are professional Christians that are coming to me telling me this. So I have to deal with them and explain to them how they can live with what they've done.
Yeah.
And why the system may have been to you unjust, but you're here. You have to deal with it.
You have to be realistic. So when you're talking about being a pastor, you're not talking about some kind of pie in the sky world. You're talking about these guys have to deal with everyday life right now, right here.
Sure. Yeah. And and like I said, I'm not painting a pretty picture. We do have some guys in there that are very dangerous, that you have to be careful of, and you know that when you're dealing with them. So most of my servers, I'll have 200 or 300 guys in that room. I'm there by myself. I don't have any officers in there with me. I'm in the prison system by myself. I'm in the chapel by myself 90% of the time.
Okay.
And so you have to be realistic that you are in a dangerous environment, and you are dealing with some dangerous people. So everybody in there is not Christians, and so you have to be cognizant of that fact. Who you're working with. So it is. I think that ironically enough, I was telling my friend from the corrections. He came out and speak for me, and I told him, I said, I think I was wired for this, because it's strange, because it's just very natural for me, and I know it's not easy for everybody.
Yeah. Oh man, we're so happy that you're there, and I realize that you actually are going right from here to work down to Pendleton, and you're going to do your job here.
Right. Yeah, I'll be there until 8 o'clock. We have a couple. Matter of fact, this is our band practice tonight. So
okay.
So
Okay.
I've got some earplugs. Although I enjoy listening to them play. Listen to them play the song over and over again. They'll get on my nerves tonight. So,
Okay.
we also have AA come in on Wednesday night. We also have Kairos, which is a large Christian organization, international organization. They come in and have Bible study tonight, and so and I think we have another Bible study goes on tonight. And so this is like I said, we have a lot of things going on in a given day. And so our choir will practice in one room, and then down the hall we got classes that are going on at the same time. We got guys who are alcohol. Substance abuse counselors come in and teach a class.
Okay.
And so a lot of that goes on Wednesdays, and so I'll be there until 8 o'clock, because sometimes to get volunteers in, they have to come in after work. So just Wednesday is my late day.
Okay.
We have 2 chaplains at the prison, and we kind of share the week, so we're there 6 days a week.
All right.
So that his late nights on Thursday, mine is on Wednesday, and then we kind of share the rest of the week and doing some of the same things.
Okay. Great. Well, look, as we're coming down to the end of the program here, we're just about to get off, mostly because we want to make sure that you get to work on time. What is if you're going to leave our listeners with any final words, whatever they might be, what would you say?
Pray for the system. Pray for the ministry. Like I said, because a lot of the federal government has gotten rid of the chaplaincy system, or they've brought chaplains back as volunteers. And so pray for the system, that people understand why we're there and what we're trying to accomplish, because I think we're out of sight, out of mind. And so a lot of times it's like, we're paying these guys to do what? And so you get the new administration come in, it's like, what are we paying these guys for? Because they don't understand. Most of these guys are not Christians that are coming into the system, and so they don't understand why it's necessary.
Okay.
So pray for the system.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Well, we're really grateful again for your participation here today with us. Thanks so much for taking the time. You are listening to RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. We come to you every Wednesday from 10 till noon. Next week, we have a real special treat. We are having Mother Womack from Unleavened Bread come in here, and we are going to hear from her about her 20 years at Unleavened Bread, and our friend Neil Cox is going to help her bring her over here to that particular radio show. So that's going to be a wonderful time. And then in a couple of weeks from here, we have some folks who are actually coming off the mission field who are down in Mexico, Guadalajara, Mexico. That's Matt and Esther. And Matt and Esther are going to be here, and we're going to be talking about cross-cultural communication. What does it mean to actually talk about and talk with other people from a different culture and language? And then in 3 weeks from now, I actually have to be out of town. I'm going to Houston to present a couple papers down at a conference. And Pastor Jim Striedelmeyer, our friend Jim, is going to be in. He's going to be covering for me, and we'll be talking. He'll be talking with some folks in the hospital system and some health agencies. It will be a special show. I really invite you all to come back to hear that. Look for our podcasts, as I mentioned earlier in the program, at ComeniusInstitute.org. You'll find everything there that we have to offer. HB, it's been a great show again today. Thanks so much for your participation. Claude, we're grateful again for your time.
Appreciate
Blessings, everyone, on the week, and thank you so much for listening. This is Warp and Woof Radio. See you next week.